My name is Clara Hayes, and I'm 36 years old. 2 months ago, I stood outside my sister's wedding. The hall was dazzling, dripping with flowers and golden lights, with over 300 guests raising glasses to her happiness. From the sidewalk, I watched limousines glide to the entrance, each guest welcomed like royalty, and me? I wasn't even allowed through the doors. She had sent me a short message earlier that week. You don't belong in this circle. Cold. Final. The kind of sentence that carves itself into your bones. I had always been the one who stayed quiet, who let her shine, who accepted being called the less successful sister. But this public humiliation, cut deeper than anything before. I stood there, dressed in a borrowed gown, clutching the envelope I had prepared. Not a gift, not a card, but a weapon. She believed the night belonged entirely to her, but I knew better. My footsteps were steady as I walked to the reception desk and slid the envelope under a pile of glittering envelopes. She thought she had erased me from her story. She didn't realize she had just written me into her downfall. The envelope was plain white, unmarked, almost forgettable. But inside it was the truth. Not rumors, not half-spoken accusations, evidence. For years, I had watched my sister and her new husband build their empire on lies. Fake donations, tax fraud, money siphoned from the family trust. At family dinners, they wore masks of generosity. Behind closed doors, they stole futures and silenced questions. I hadn't planned to expose them, not at first. But when she told me I wasn't fit to attend her wedding, something inside me snapped. The wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was her crowning moment, proof that she had everything I didn't. So I decided her perfect day would become the first crack in her empire. The USB drive inside the envelope contained years of files, emails, receipts, even recordings I had collected quietly, and a single note, typed in bold letters. Play this if you want to know the truth about the bride and groom. I walked away that night with my head high. She thought the spotlight would blind everyone to the shadows. I knew the shadows were about to swallow her whole. 2 days after the wedding, the first call came. My mother's voice trembled as she asked if I had done something. She didn't know details yet, but whispers were spreading. Someone had slipped the USB to a journalist, and the first article appeared online. It was small at first, an exposé on suspicious transactions tied to my sister's husband. But the internet is a wildfire. Screenshots flew across social media. People who toasted at her wedding were now sending screenshots to each other with disbelief. Within hours, the hashtag with her name trended, not for her dress, but for her lies. My phone buzzed with messages, some accusing, some supportive. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to defend myself, not yet. This wasn't about me. It was about truth finally catching up. By the end of the week, the family trust had frozen its accounts pending investigation. Vendors began canceling contracts. My sister's fairy tale honeymoon was interrupted by lawyers. She had wanted the perfect beginning to her new life. Instead, she had been given the opening act of her downfall. And I waited. This was only the beginning. Our family gatherings turned into war councils. My sister stormed into my apartment, eyes blazing, calling me a traitor. She accused me of being jealous, of fabricating everything. Her words were sharp, but her voice shook. Fear had already crept into her perfect world. I gave you nothing but love, she shouted. I almost laughed. Love? Exclusion, humiliation, constant reminders that I wasn't enough. That was her love. She had mocked me for years, painting me as the failure while she posed as the star. But I didn't raise my voice. I let her rage while I sat calmly. Silence is its own weapon, and it unnerved her more than any scream could. Finally, she left, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. Later, an aunt called, begging me to retract whatever I had released. She didn't understand. The truth wasn't retractable. Once light pours into darkness, you can't push it back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet sister in the corner. I was the storm in the room, and everyone felt it. The newspapers published more documents. The stolen donations, the forged signatures, the fake charities. Each article tore away another piece of her perfect image. The woman in the glossy magazines, the bride in white lace, the darling of society. Suddenly she was a fraud, a thief, a liar. Her sponsors withdrew. Her husband's company stock plummeted. Friends who once praised her vanished. My sister, who had basked in applause, now drowned in silence. I watched from a distance. Part of me expected to feel guilty, to regret pulling the thread that unraveled her empire. But I didn't. I remembered her words. "You don't belong in this circle." She was right. I didn't belong in her circle of lies. For the first time, I belonged to myself, but I also knew this was far from over. They would fight back. People like her don't surrender easily, and I was ready. I had only shown the world the first half of what I had uncovered. The real storm was still waiting in my hands. When the auditors dug deeper, the cracks widened. My sister's husband, who once bragged about his empire, was caught in a web of fraud. Shell companies, offshore accounts, stolen donations meant for schools and hospitals. His name went from magazine covers to court summons. My sister tried to shield him, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But the world no longer believed her. For years she had preached about integrity and charity, and now the evidence of betrayal was undeniable. I stayed silent. No interviews, no statements. The louder she shouted her innocence, the smaller she became in the eyes of the public. One evening, I walked past their mansion, reporters crowding the gates. Flashes from cameras lit the night sky like lightning. I saw her silhouette behind the curtains, trapped in the cage she built herself. The world now knew what I had always known. Their empire was built on stolen bricks, and I wasn't done tearing it down. Our relatives began to divide. Some blamed me for airing dirty laundry, begging me to stay silent. Others quietly admitted they had suspected corruption all along. For years they had turned away, afraid to lose their comfort. Now, they wanted me to fix what they had allowed to grow. At one family meeting, my mother broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Why couldn't you just stay quiet, Clara?" My heart ached, but I didn't bend. Silence had protected liars for too long. My sister, sitting across the table, looked at me with eyes full of venom. She wanted me erased. She wanted me ruined. But she couldn't touch me. Not anymore. I left that room knowing one thing. Blood may bind us, but truth divides us stronger. I was no longer fighting just my sister. I was fighting the family legacy she had corrupted, and I was prepared to burn it clean. The mansion we grew up admiring turned into a symbol of corruption. Reporters swarmed it daily, pointing out how it had been illegally financed. Documents proved the deed was fraudulent, signed through manipulated papers. What we thought was our grandfather's legacy was nothing but stolen property. I remembered walking through its halls as a child, dreaming of belonging. Now, I saw it for what it really was, a house built on lies. My sister begged the court to protect it. She wept on the stand, claiming innocence. But evidence is heavier than tears. The mansion was seized pending investigation, stripped of its golden facade. I watched quietly as the gates were locked, the chandeliers dimmed. The empire she had paraded as her triumph was now an empty shell. For years, she had told me I didn't deserve a seat at her table. Now her table had been taken away. The pressure finally broke her. One night she called me, her voice trembling. Gone was the arrogance, the cruelty. In its place was desperation. "Clara, please." "Stop, you've won." "I have nothing left." For a moment I almost softened. She was still my sister, the girl I had shared childhood secrets with. But then I remembered the humiliation, the years of exclusion, the pain of standing outside her wedding as if I were a stranger. "This isn't about winning," I told her. "It's about truth, and the truth doesn't stop because it hurts you." She sobbed, begging, promising to change. But I knew promises made under fire are empty. The world had to see the full picture, not just fragments. When I hung up, my hands shook. Revenge wasn't sweet, it was heavy. But it was necessary, and I wasn't finished yet. The court hearings began. Evidence filled box after box, each page a nail in the coffin of her reputation. Witnesses testified. Journalists reported every detail. The world that once adored her now waited eagerly for her sentencing. She tried to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, blaming her husband, the advisors, even me. But the judges weren't blind. The documents didn't lie. When the verdict came, her husband faced prison time, while she was sentenced to house arrest, her assets frozen, her title stripped. The empire was officially declared fraudulent. I sat in the back of the courtroom, calm. This wasn't joy. This was closure. For years, I had lived in her shadow. Now the world saw who she truly was. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about balance. And finally, the scales were level. The fallout was messy. Cousins cut ties. Old friends accused me of betrayal. Invitations stopped coming. My mother barely spoke to me, trapped between love for me and grief for the daughter she lost to lies. But strangers reached out. Teachers thanked me for exposing stolen donations. Former employees sent letters of gratitude. People who had been silenced finally had a voice. I had lost my family approval, but I had gained something greater: self-respect. For the first time, I stood tall without needing anyone's validation. The price of truth was loneliness. But it was a loneliness I could endure, because deep down, I knew I had saved more than I had destroyed. Now, months later, the dust has settled. My sister lives quietly, stripped of her crown, her empire in ruins. We barely speak, but sometimes I see her name in the papers, always attached to disgrace. I walk freely now, not in her shadow, but in my own light. People ask if I regret it. I don't. Betrayal cut me once, but silence would have cut me forever. That night at her wedding, I was the outcast sister standing outside in the cold. Today, I am the woman who turned truth into fire, and I will never apologize for burning down a house built on lies.